Hello, humans. It's been a hot minute since we did another update, obviously, on euthanasia. I'm cutting the word made. We're no longer saying it on this platform. I'm going to have to work on my verbiage because I really don't want to be using the word made anymore. I'm so done with desensitizing our population to what we are doing, which is mass killing within our healthcare system. So to start that off, we brought Alex Schadenberg back, and I'll be honest, he's going to be back all the time. We have had several episodes with him now, Alicia Duncan, Roger Foley, all of these amazing individuals, Dr. Zivit, looking at the issue of euthanasia, but we're going to branch it out. If you guys have not been following the story, you have not been seeing what's happening. Not only have coroner reports have started to come out, but you have heard me speak about it on other platforms like Trigonometry and others, looking at things like the 15,000 people that were murdered last year in Canada alone, to now expansion in the UK, which is a subject we're going to cover today, as well as looking at the Ontario's coroner report. Over 400 people, let me just say that again. Over 400 people have been looked at for wrongful death because they believe they either didn't qualify or the doctor did not do the proper paperwork, or for whatever reason, the self-reporting system, shocker, self-reporting system, isn't working because our safeguards are almost non-existent. For the update, the UK now has gone through its second reading and has been voted in favor. We have one more opportunity, if I'm not mistaken, Alex, to make sure that this thing actually can be stopped in the UK and we can save not only the citizens of the UK from going through what we have gone through now since 2016. And we can also stop the vulnerable individuals and the veteran population from experiencing the sanctuary trauma that comes with their healthcare providers offering them assisted suicide and euthanasia versus giving them the care that they so much deserve. So, Alex, where are we at in the UK, my friend?
Well, there was just a vote on the second reading, as you already mentioned, and it did pass at second reading.
Right.
Someone's going to get my phone, so don't worry about
That's
it.
okay. I'm not stressed.
It did pass at second reading, but it's not done yet. And what's interesting about it is the vote was reasonably close, actually, if you consider what the predictions were going to be, because there's 650 members of parliament in the UK, and in the last election, Labour won 411, and the leader of the Labour Party, his name is Keir Starmer, he's the current prime minister then. He's been a strong supporter of assisted suicide for a very, very, very long time. I mean, a very long time. So obviously speaking, if you're in a party where your party leader is a strong supporter, and here's the other little factor, 53% of the members of parliament in the UK out of the 650, 53% of them are new. They were newly elected. So you have this massive number of new Labour MPs who their whole existence is connected to the fact that Keir Starmer got them through an election successfully and they won a majority government. So the vote was much closer than people anticipated it was going to be. I believe if we move, I think it's we need to move 28 votes and then we're in, meaning because you had 28, if you get 28 going no, you're in. And of course, there's a whole bunch of, there was just a report the other day that came out that over 30 of the members of parliament said that they only voted yes at second reading in order to allow the debate to continue, but they're
Which
not.
Which is terrifying.
Well, they're not convinced that they want to vote in favor in the end. So these are people who clearly can be moved over, but they voted yes at this point because they thought that the debate should continue. So what's going to happen is they have the same political system as Canada, and I know you have Americans watching too, so I can explain the system fairly quick.
Please.
The second reading vote means that the bill will now go to committee. They're going to have a full committee debate. Obviously speaking, the bill might get amended before it goes to final vote. So what happens is then people will be asked to give input. So there'll be certain experts, physicians, whoever, philosophers, whoever you want to name, will come forward and give their input into this legislation. It may or may not get amended, and then it goes to final reading. If it passes final reading, it still has to be passed by the House of Lords in order to become law. So it's very similar to the Canadian system. As you know, though, in the UK, the House of Lords, like Canada, is an appointed place.
Right.
So, that's a very interesting situation also. But you can see where things are going on. I just wrote an article today about the whole situation about the National Healthcare Service. So in Canada, we have very similar issues as in the UK with their National Healthcare Service. They're running massive funding problems with the National Healthcare Service in the UK. The government's running a deficit. The healthcare service is hitting massive heights in expenses, and they're really in shock as to how can they maintain this national healthcare service, similar to what we have in Canada, and at the same time be able to pay for it. And I'm pointing out that really if you look at what they're doing in the UK, talking about trying to control the cost of the healthcare service in the UK in order to allow it to be affordable, the only thing they're actually offering of change is legalizing assisted suicide.
Right.
If you consider Canada's situation, we're running massive public cost deficits in our healthcare system. We've got massive problems with our healthcare system. Look at British Columbia and the waiting lists for even cancer treatment alone. That's just one issue. The massive waiting list. People have died by euthanasia in Canada, not because they were seeking it, saying, oh, I really want this. It's because they had no access to healthcare, or they were in a waiting line to receive cancer treatment for so long that they decided that they couldn't handle this any longer, and they chose death because they weren't given an option to choose life. And there's quite a few of those stories, especially on the island, on Vancouver Island around Victoria, where there seems to be a greater healthcare crisis than in most places. But that's not just a BC problem. That's happening in Ontario. Recent reports out of Ontario talking about our situation where quite a few of our hospitals are running massive deficits, where there's cutbacks in care, long waiting lines, and then we have euthanasia, which you can get tomorrow.
Right. So that's something we've discussed this on other episodes before, and we've gotten, and by we, I mean, a couple weeks ago, again, Dying with Dignity Canada decided to make this shit is so funny to me, Alex, because they have tried so hard to try to discredit me by using other medical professionals. And by medical professional, I'm using that term incredibly loose, super loose. These individuals have clung on to this show and these episodes and will be watching this one again. And they have done everything they can to discredit myself and Jordan Peterson's clip that has literally gone so viral that they can't stop it, whether they like it or not, to the point in which on Twitter frequently, or X, my apologies, they have stated, Ellen has stated herself that they just want people to stop discussing it. They want it to stop being a topic of conversation, because we all know that when you stop talking about something, it goes into the dark, and that's where bad things grow. And that's why Ellen has been able to kill over 400 on record people herself as an individual. So the reason I'm addressing,
as you know, with Ellen, I don't like to interrupt you, but she made that statement about 400 in 2022.
That's 2022.
Right, and she's not willing to give a different number now. I think there was such a bad reaction in 2022 to the 400 number. She's not willing to tell you that it's probably over 1,000 now. Like, I wouldn't know, obviously, but she's been killing constantly over this period of time. So,
and think about the amount of people that she has been killing, of just the individuals that we are consciously aware of.
Yes,
so absolutely. Much so that a British Columbia judge in the 11th hour, which we haven't done an episode since. So let's take a second on that. A British Columbia judge, since then, in the 11th hour, which had never been done before, put a court injunction in to stop her from killing someone that did not qualify, and that she approved over Zoom on the very first session without having a second doctor, meeting with a second doctor. And she herself provided a second signature, which we know is a conflict of interest across the board from the law's perspective. And whether she likes it or not, she got it stopped. If a judge, which is very public, if people are wondering, well, Kelsey, you're being defamatory, I encourage you to go Google the actual case. The entire court filing is public. It is public knowledge. It is what I spoke about on trigonometry.
Yep.
It is very aware that you can see in there that the judge was hyper concerned about the abusive practice from this particular medical doctor in this country. This is not me saying it, throwing shade. This is an actual judge in the BC court system that has read enough within one case to question this doctor's judgment.
That's exactly. And that was an out of province case. That's why it was done over Zoom. She had never even met this person. This person was turned down. She doctor shopped. That's right. This person was turned down for euthanasia by all the doctors who she had talked to in Alberta. She was told no, 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 no. So she contacted Ellen Wiebe, who said yes. So then she flew to Vancouver to die. If it wasn't for her common law husband, I'm hoping they're still together. If it wasn't for him,
they are.
She would be dead today. And he was simply saying, well, wait a second. She doesn't have an irremediable medical condition. She doesn't qualify for the basic thing that the law says. And that's even pretty wide open. Like, what is an irremediable medical condition? So you're killing someone because they have a medical condition which isn't going to get better. But think about it. This woman didn't even have that. And pretty much every person with a disability in Canada would have an irremediable medical condition, because that's why they have a disability.
Correct.
So, this is why the disability lobby is so upset about this undefined term, irremediable medical condition. She didn't even qualify for that, he said. And the judge
No.
was sort of like scratching his head. So this woman actually, as you are aware, this case was dropped because
Yes.
she left. She decided not to die by
Well,
Ellen Weeb. But
well,
anyway, we go on.
well, no, we don't have to go on. I'm just going to give you an update. She's still very much pushing.
Yes.
She's very much still attempting. She is very much, because the court injunction at this date now is up. And so her common law partner, who we have been in communication with, by we, I mean Alicia Duncan and Christopher Lyon and WV and everyone else in our little merry band of anti-maid murderers, have been working really hard to make sure that not only is that
anti-murderers you are. You can't be an anti-maid murderer.
do you know what I mean? I'm just like, how about we don't kill people? Like, I don't know. Like, there's so many words that have been used to describe me as a human being now.
Yeah.
I'm just going with I don't want to kill people. How about that? I know, and it's an oxymoron in some ways and hypocrisy because of my past, but I feel like I'm one of those people that when you start to take people off the face of the earth, it's either going to make you want to do it more, it's going to make you not want to do it ever again. I definitely lean on that. It made me never want to do it again.
That's exactly it. I understand that completely. So we get the situation, and it actually leads us into the other issue of the whole Ontario report. I know you have mentioned
I want to
that
talk
in
about
the
Ontario. Yeah, I want to talk about the Ontario report. But before we switch over to Canada a little more, I do want to address something that I saw that was really important. I pulled it up here. Kim Leadbeater. So if people don't know who Kim Leadbeater is, she is in the UK, and she is she sponsored the bill.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Yes,
okay, so
that's
she's the
correct.
sponsor
Yes.
of the bill.
She's a Labour MP who sponsored the bill. So it's a private member's bill.
Right. And so the reason I want to bring her up is because she is somebody that is like outside of Keir has been spearheading. And I have been, I don't say attacking, but I have been verbalizing my disdain for a few doctors in Canada, i.e. Stephanie Green, Ellen Weeb, Dying with Dignity, all of that. And I think it's about time we start spreading the word a little bit about more people that are actively out there spending every waking minute of their lives trying to kill more people. So Kim Leadbeater is one of those, as well as Keir. Everyone knows that about
Starmer,
Keir.
yes.
Yeah, right. So, but the thing with, I guess I have to call him Prime Minister. No, I don't. I don't respect you for that.
Call him Starmer. He's a Starmer.
Starmer. we're
not Stormer. Starmer.
Starmer. I want to talk about Kim because this female seems to have brought forward such an aggressive way to look at this, and she recently has suggested that she's okay. Let me try again. Kim Leadbeater suggests being a burden on the government, healthcare system, and your family is a legitimate reason for suicide.
Yes.
You take a sec on that.
And I want to throw something at you. This is not new. In the
I know,
UK,
but that's insane.
Well, history repeats itself, doesn't it? This is the reality.
We know that history repeats itself, but the difference between history repeating itself and hearing it in Parliament in 2024 is insane. That we could say out loud that you being a burden to the NHS, the Canadian healthcare system, to the American healthcare system, to the taxpayer, to the family member, to those struggling with mental health, this signals something so much darker. And as I said before, and I'll say it again, she and her thought process is a symptom of a sick society.
Absolutely, and it's very eugenic, and
incredibly.
The only thing that makes it so sick is that she's actually stating what many of them believe already. And I'm not talking about the average person who's in fear of suffering and who's thinking, Kelsey, if I were in a bad situation and I were suffering, I don't ever justify killing somebody, but I understand their thought process. But these people, quite a few of them are very eugenic, meaning they look at certain lives as not worth living. So when you look at the dying with the not dead yet people and the disability people talking about how this issue directly affects their lives, and then you hear that comment by Leadbeater, you understand why they're concerned. You understand exactly why they're concerned. And the thing of it is this affects all of us too. Now, a few years ago, this Baroness Warnock, who's sort of like an ethicist, but she has passed away since, but she made a comment in the UK that people who were costing the NHS all this money, who were suffering, as she described it, that they should just get on and off. get off, right? Be dead. And that had a lot of effect upon her whole comments, because a lot of people reacted to that. What do you mean? You're talking about killing my grandma? Is this what you're talking about, killing my grandma? But that's exactly what she was talking about, and it's exactly what this is about, killing grandma. They say, oh, well, this will be all about free choice. That's what they talk about, this idea of free choice. But now it's a societal push to have this become possible that somebody else is involved with killing you. So they talk about choice and freedom and autonomy, and then they say, oh, Alex, you're against choice and freedom and autonomy. And I say, well, I'm not against choice, and I'm not against freedom, and I'm not against autonomy, but I am against doctors killing me.
Right.
That's what I'm against. And I don't trust that doctors should ever be involved with killing me. And I don't think it's ever a good idea to have doctors kill you anyway, because of what comes of it.
Well, and let's take it a step further. It's not okay that doctors are killing, because doctors and the Hippocratic Oath is by definition to help and heal and save at all cost. Let's take it a step further. I'm not okay with killing, number one, but I'm even more not okay, and I'm sure there's a better way to say that. I'm not okay with government deciding what healthcare and who gets death care versus healthcare. And I'm not okay with government involving themselves more in our lives. We have seen time and time again throughout history what happens when you start relying solely on government to look after you, feed you, fund you, and house you.
That's exactly it. So government now is going to be involved with whether you live or you die. And you would say, well, wait a second, this is all about choice and autonomy. And the answer is, well, sometimes you're given no choice and no autonomy. What about the person who, is diagnosed with cancer, and then they're waiting in the queue for care, and they're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting, and it doesn't come. And then they feel, oh, well, I'm in pain. I'm not receiving the care, and my cancer seems to be spreading. Well, that becomes a pretty, how would you say, emotionally difficult, physically difficult, psychologically difficult situation. And then they say it's all about choice. No, you're dangling the option of killing somebody in front of them, and you're saying, oh, by the way, we might get to the care. It might happen. Now, you may say, yeah, it might happen. And you might say, well, what are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about real cases that have happened. And I mentioned that before. You had several of them in BC alone like that. And this is what's so important. And when you get to that, you start saying, well, how do I deal with that? How do we deal with that? Well, the only way to deal with it is to say, well, we don't kill. Like, for instance, you might remember in December of 2023, the news stories around the fact that Dan Quayle in Victoria, BC, died by euthanasia, not because he wanted euthanasia, but because he was approved for treatment for his cancer, and he was put in the waiting line, and he received no treatment for his cancer.
And brought to you by Culture. You guys know I am so dedicated to my mental health and my physical resilience. I'm always on the lookout for the next tool that makes the biggest difference. And that's why I'm so excited to share with you my new partnership with Culture. They are Canada's #1 cold plunge, and they are trusted by over 40,000 people across North America. The benefits are incredible, whether it's better sleep, reduced stress, faster recovery, or just more energy at the end of the day. And with Culture's unmatched quality and world-class customer care, this is the brand that I trust, not only for me, but my family. So if you're ready to challenge yourself, to change your life, improve your life, then go over to culture.com and use the code Kelsey at checkout. It's going to give you $250 off your first purchase. So what are you waiting for? Go on over, culture.com. Use the code Kelsey. Let's go. Hey guys, this episode is brought to you by Good Livin'. I am so excited to tell you about something that's become such a meaningful part of my wellness routine, Good Livin'. Now, this isn't any brand. This is actually a brand I know all of the owners behind. And let me tell you, their integrity, their dedication, and their quality is the real deal. Their microdosing and functional blends are crafted with intention, and you can feel it. Everything is tested and made to support you in tapping into your own rhythm. We're talking about blends for anxiety, depression and stress, ADHD, brain health, inflammation, sleep, and energy. Seriously, they have thought of everything possible. I know firsthand how much love they pour into every single product. So if you're ready to check them out and explore more, go to itsgoodlivin.com. And trust me, it's a journey worth taking. That's itsgoodlivin.com, itsgoodlivin.com. And make sure to use the code BRASS and get 20% off your first order today. Right.
Like, tell me, that's all about choice and freedom and autonomy. Tell me, how do you come up with that? I don't get it. And he's not the only one. There's a whole bunch of them that this has happened to. And what about the people with disabilities who are constantly being pressured?
Can we talk about that for a second? Because nobody really wants to acknowledge that the disability computer is the disability community, not even like the disability government, the disability community, the disability individuals. Like, there is so much more to that than people want to acknowledge, because they don't realize that cult-like mentality and individuals like Dying with Dignity are going into the disability community and dangling a carrot. Like, this is not something they're coming up with on their own. I know plenty of people that are disabled. I know plenty of people that are quadriplegic, paraplegic. I know people with lost limbs. I know people who cannot see. I know people that have MS. I know people like Roger Foley who have degenerative disorders, like Liz Carr, who live full lives to the best of their ability, and they're grateful that they get to breathe every day.
Well, the prime example, Roger Foley, he doesn't want to be living in a hospital in London, Ontario. He's got no wish to be in a hospital in London, Ontario. He wants to be in his home, but he can't. The Ontario government won't agree to fund his 24-hour care that he needs in the way he needs it. So obviously speaking, he says, with my health condition, I can't leave the hospital if you're not going to provide me the care. I can't walk. Right. I can't move around. I can't do things for myself. I need 24-hour care. I don't want to be here. But they've offered him euthanasia. They've said several times that. Now, I did an interview with Roger Foley, and then this Heather Hancock joined that, because I did it online live, and Heather Hancock joined. And Heather's a woman with, she was born with spastic cerebral palsy. She's though she's a brilliant woman. You talk to her, she's brilliant. But here she's in the hospital with health problems, and this happened to her twice, and in two different hospitals, where, she says in the one case, this nurse comes to her before breakfast, so it's like 6:30 in the morning, and tells her, Heather, do the right thing. You should be asking for euthanasia. Well, she said maid, of course. The nurse
do
said
the
maid.
right thing.
Do the right thing.
The audacity of another human. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's counseling suicide.
That would be counseling suicide. That person should be charged. Now, of course, Heather wasn't interested in death. Heather was interested in life. Heather was going through a health problem. Heather's back home, living her life. She does a lot of writing. She does editing. She's a very intellectually impressive person. Yet here she's going through a health problem. So whether she has spastic cerebral palsy or she's an 82-year-old grandmother going through a temporary health problem, how dare you come in the room and say to them, "Oh, by the way, do the right thing. You should be asking to die because the nurse said to her, you're not living, you're just existing." Now think about that. You're going through a difficult time. Like, imagine you're going through a health problem. You've gone through health problems yourself. So imagine someone coming in there who's supposed to be your caregiver telling you, Kelsey, I know you're going through hell right now, but why don't you do yourself a favor and have us give you those lethal drugs or lethal poison so you can all have that all ended. Then you don't have to worry about it anymore. And I have to admit, euthanasia is 100% effective. Once you're dead, you're dead. But the fact of it is that's insane. And what people don't understand in Canada is that in every major hospital in Canada, they have a MAID team. Now, I'm talking about major secular hospital. Obviously, St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver does not have a MAID team. No,
but they will for sure if you live up north where they don't have great health care for the Indigenous. They won't bring you health care, but they will fly a MAID team out to you.
That's exactly what they're going to do. Yes, there's a whole story I have about that too. They are doing it. I know all about it. I got a call from a guy. I'm going to finish what I'm doing though first, and I'll get to that story.
And then let's talk about that.
But they have a MAID team. So then they say, so the MAID team comes to your room and tells you, I noticed that you might be in palliative care, or you might be having this medical condition. We just want to make sure you know that MAID is available to you. What are you talking about? MAID is available. We can have MAID for you. Now, this is a form of coercion, actually. Now, they sell it as, it's important that people know all their options. But let's put this into human reality. I'm going through a difficult health condition. I'm in the hospital. I may recognize that my days are numbered. I may not. But to have someone come in your room say, we can offer you death. This is not about freedom, choice, and autonomy now. This is a form of
No.
coercion, because you have to understand, as a human being, it's normal for me to be emotionally, psychologically affected by my physical reality. It's normal. It's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely normal. And then they say, oh, we can't understand why Canada's euthanasia numbers are so high. Well, they're so high because we're selling it. We're not only
We're
pushing it, we're
coercing
selling
them.
it. We're coercing them. Now, your other story, I had this guy call me up, and his uncle, who lived way up in Flin Flon, Manitoba, his uncle had talked to his
Is that a
doctor
real
about MAID.
place?
There is, you can Google it, Flin Flon, Manitoba. It's way up north. I've actually spoken in Flin Flon once. It's a long way to go. It's a
Oh
way up
my
there. It's actually
goodness.
quite. It's actually there's a lot of stone around Flin Flon, so it's an
Okay.
interesting place. But anyway, so what happened is that he talked to his doctor about he had a serious health condition, so there's no question
Mm-hmm.
about that. So there's nobody in Flin Flon at the time who was doing euthanasia, so therefore they contacted the Winnipeg team. They flew them up to Flin Flon. So imagine, our Canadian government, or Manitoba's government in this case, pays for a plane to fly up this doctor and this nurse to meet this guy. They do the assessment, and in the end he decided he didn't want to die, so they flew all the way back. Well, the cost of killing this guy was excessive, but of course, if he needed medical treatment, would they have flown a team to go up there to do
No.
surgery? How would that have happened? Like, they might have flown him into Winnipeg to give him treatment, but he might have even had to wait. But with euthanasia, you could get treatment if
Immediate.
you can get it immediately. If you are actually having a condition, if you have a condition which is deemed to be terminal,
Right.
that your natural death is reasonably foreseeable,
Or
then you can have it the next day.
or
You
let's
can actually
talk
have it
about
that day.
let's talk about the or that everyone tells me that is not true. Let's talk about the real or, right? Because Ellen Weeb has been caught doing this. So the real or, when people say, Kelsey, nobody can die in 24 hours, you need to stop. I love people that come on my YouTube. I fucking love it, because the stupid shit that comes out of their mouth like this, you cannot die within 24 hours. Kelsey, do you hear how ridiculous that sounds? Really? Because all that you have to do is, if you were on track 2, is say to your doctor, I am no longer eating or drinking, and you qualify within 24 hours.
For track
That's
one, that's right.
simple.
Okay, now you've brought up track one, track two. There might be listeners that don't understand this terminology. So
Okay.
in Canada, when we amended our law in March of 2021, we removed the terminal illness requirement from the law. So if you are terminally ill, you become track one. Now, terminal illness is defined as your natural death is reasonably foreseeable, which is not defined. So that means you have a terminal condition. You might not be terminally ill at all, but you might have a terminal condition. There are lots of people who have terminal conditions who are not dying anytime soon. But if they have a
Right.
terminal condition, they now qualify under track one, and there is no waiting period. As long as 2 people, either a doctor or nurse practitioners, have signed that form, they can go ahead and kill you. It could be done in 1 day. That might be pushing it. Maybe it takes an extra day, whatever. The point of it is you can be killed immediately. The law has no waiting period. But if you are deemed that your natural death is not reasonably foreseeable, but you have an irremediable medical condition, that's not defined either. But what does it mean? It means you've got a chronic condition. That's why I said again, people with disabilities in Canada pretty much all now qualify to be killed, because the law has an undefined term that you have an irremediable medical condition. Now they say also you must be suffering, but I can't determine suffering and you can't determine suffering. If Kelsey tells me she's suffering, I can't tell her she's not, or I can't tell her she is. She's the only one who could say that, because she's the only one experiencing it. So if you tell me she's suffering, that's a thing that's in the law. You have to say you're suffering. What does it actually mean? I'm not saying these people aren't suffering. I'm just saying it's impossible for us to determine that you're suffering or not suffering. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just part of the law to make us all justify the killing. This is all about justification. Anyway, if you're track 2, meaning that you're not dying, you have a 90-day waiting period. Now, Kelsey is exactly correct. If you then decide that you want to die and don't want to wait the 90 days, all you have to do is say, I'm going to stop eating and drinking. Once you've stopped eating and drinking, you immediately then qualify under track 1, because, especially if you stop drinking. If you stop drinking, you're going to die within 10 to 15 days. It's going to happen no matter what,
And it will be painful and excruciating and quite
right? Well,
dramatic
that's
to
right.
watch.
Yes, yeah, it's pretty terrible. It takes a long time to die of starvation. That takes a very long time. But
The
dehydration
dehydration.
takes 10 to 15 days. So
Yeah.
immediately then you qualify. and then they can go ahead and kill you as if it's track 1. So when you're looking at these track 2 deaths, quite a few of these track 1 deaths were actually track 2 deaths, meaning the person wasn't actually dying, but because they wanted it sped up, they decided to say, well, I'm not going to,
And
I'm not
that's
going to be
literally
eating
it.
or
There's
drinking. That's
nothing.
all they have to
Yeah,
say.
there's no more, like, people will say to me, and they'll say, but and I had this conversation with Constantine and Francis, and they said to me after the interview, the one that hasn't come out yet, they said to me, like, do you have proof of everything you just said? And I said, absolutely. And then I provided an entire page on page on page email. And the reason they looked at me sometimes with such a strange look on my face is because I would say things like the 7.6% of the death rate coming out of Quebec and the amount of people killed were actually euthanasia deaths. And
Yeah.
it's such an aggressive statement, the same way it's such an aggressive statement to say something like, all that you have to do is say you're done eating and drinking. Well, no, in their mind, there has to be something incredibly complicated, more paperwork, more doctors, more professionals, more individuals who understand the pain management side, that understand the psychology side, that understand in their field. The truth and the fact of the matter is that's just not reality. You genuinely, all you have to say with your mouth, and the words are, I'm no longer eating or drinking. That's it. There is no other safeguard. There is no other
That's right.
application process. And I really want to hammer that home because it is that simplistic.
There's no third person oversight to ensure that the law is being properly followed. There's nothing. You get 2 doctors or 2 nurse practitioners signing off, and it's done. And the other thing, as I said, this law gives total legal cover because the law says the doctor or nurse practitioner only have to be of the opinion that you had fit the criteria of the law.
You don't have
Therefore,
to
when you
prove
start,
it.
don't have to prove it. So when you hear of these crazy stories that have hit the media, you start saying to yourself, well, how could that have happened? It's because the doctor knew it didn't matter. Once
Right.
you're dead, you're dead. First of
Right.
all, dead people don't make witnesses because they're dead.
Right.
Secondly, the doctor, if the family were upset about, the doctor will only have to say, I was of the opinion so and so, Donna Duncan, fit the criteria of the law.
Correct.
And whether it was right or wrong, it doesn't make a difference because the law gave cover. The law
Right.
gave total cover. Now I'm going to say one other thing. To be fair, certain doctors in Canada are really into this. And then there's some doctors who have done a few deaths who are not really into this. And so then if we're talking about this and someone says, well, but my mother applied for MAID and they turned her down and this sort of situation, I'd say, well, that's actually good that she was turned down because you actually had a doctor who sadly was willing to kill her, but, was at least a bit careful because, of course,
Right.
there's a total difference between some doctors who are really into this and
Right.
other ones. And then you also can see that in the data in Canada because Manitoba and Newfoundland and a couple provinces have a very low rate of killing. And then you have
Right.
Quebec, which is insane. You got British Columbia, which is almost as insane.
Yeah.
Quebec has more euthanasia deaths than Ontario, and yet Quebec's population doesn't compare to Ontario's population. I hate to say that because the French believe that they are
They're
such a
not.
distinct society and that they're
They're
bigger than
not.
us. And
They're not.
and it doesn't matter really, to tell you the truth, because I have no problems with the Quebecois. I'm just saying to you, they have a heck of a lot more killing than we
Oui,
have,
je comprends,
numbers
but
wise.
they're still the Quebecois. Stop it.
Not only the
Stop it.
percentage of deaths, but the numbers. Their numbers of deaths. Oh, wait, Ontario's like crazy, and yet at the same time, Ontario is so much bigger.
So look at the population. Can you explain the population size of Quebec versus Ontario right now, and then explain why that number is so astronomically high?
Well, I can't. It's hard to explain why the number's so astronomically high, but obviously there's a cultural thing here where
Right.
people have gotten heavily involved with buying into this as some sort of new freedom, new opportunity in life. I think it also has something to do with the Quebec healthcare system. As bad as it is in Ontario, there are some parts of Ontario where the healthcare system is actually working fairly well still.
Okay,
The
where?
problem with healthcare is, you're in Ottawa and they might have great opportunities for getting, let's say, hip operations getting done, and yet you may be in Windsor, Ontario, and you're waiting forever. That's how it sort of works in Ontario, right? It's the same as British
Right.
Columbia. Every region has its own difficulties,
Right.
and this is just a reality. For instance, people who want certain surgery, sometimes they're told, well, we're not going to send you to London because we know you're going to be forever on a waiting list. But if you go off to this city, well, we'll try and get you scheduled for that surgery in this city because we know that there's no waiting list in that city. That's what we're getting to. Quebec
Yeah.
seems to have a serious healthcare problems. There's also this cultural thing in Quebec, and they seem to have rejected everything from the past. But let me tell you, the past said you can't kill people not because of some religious bugaboo, but because you couldn't kill people. And there was nothing wrong with the idea of not being able to kill people. That was perfectly fine. But because the Quebecois have gotten heavily into, rejecting a religious past, a lot of them have bought into these things as freedom. This is freedom. This is freedom. But it's not freedom when someone else kills you. That's not
It's not.
freedom. It's got nothing to do with freedom. It's got nothing to do with choice. It certainly has nothing to do with autonomy. How could it be autonomous when somebody else is putting lethal poison in your body? How is that about autonomy? I hate to say it. Suicide can be an autonomy, even though it's usually related to mental health issues. But when someone else kills you, that's not about autonomy. That's
Right.
all a philosophical lie. These are the flags they wave to make you feel better about killing. And of
Well,
course, the
that's
redefining of the language, too, is the other thing we've done.
Well, that's why you also have like the slow drip soft launch, like Simon's Department Store did years ago. It
Yeah.
was an attempt to see where's the population and the country at. Will they reject this ad, or will they lean into this ad and say it was beautiful and empathetic and compassionate? Which also, I would like to take a look at who funded that ad, because the more and more that we are in our very, very private group of 40 people that are just insanely talented, there is an individual in there that I've been working with lately that has been looking at a lot of donations. And we're
Yes.
starting to see some stuff come from the Middle East at large donation bases. And I'm trying to understand why all of a sudden Dying with Dignity has people like Telus and Rogers on their donation list, who specifically and emphatically around the mental health awareness and suicide prevention times does ads on suicide preventions, yet donates to one of the largest pro-death cults, including some other organizations, including Catholic institutions, Jewish institutions, and others that are supposed to be against euthanasia, yet they're on their largest donor list of 2023.
Yes, I know. And if you start looking at the donor list, like I just got the email from
Oh,
Dying with Dignity thanking people for the, what was it, $1.9 million they raised in the last few days. And I'm thinking,
few days.
yeah, it just came out. I just got the email. I could
I
forward it
need
to you.
that. Please
Yeah,
forward that
here
to
it is
me.
right here. Yeah.
Forward over. Let's talk about it. Let's do this stuff together, Alex. Send it on over right now. How's that sound? And we'll go through it together for our last 25
Actually,
minutes
no, I'm in error. That's my old age thing. It was 194,000 anyway.
But in the last
Still,
few days, but the fact of the matter is they still have over $7 million on average a year, but also their donations went from on average $5 to $18 to $55. And there is a lovely organization that is running it through that comes from one of the royal families. So I am trying to understand, though, number one, where this money's coming from, why it's coming, and how it's coming at the pace in which it's coming. Because from what it seems like, the global conversation, whether it's the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Denmark, Belgium, wherever, Canada, and for those that are American that are listening, yes, 10 states, one jurisdiction, and you're expanding, Oregon, New Mexico, California, all of those. These are happening, and these are states that you do not have to live in to get it. So people are traveling just like they would travel anywhere else for abortion or others. You can travel to
right.
these states
Like
and get
Oregon and
what you
Vermont,
need,
yes.
like Oregon
Yeah.
and Vermont, and then
Yeah.
go back to your place of residence and murder yourself there.
Well, the rules actually are that you have to die in Oregon. So the Oregon rule is, now I'm not saying that's how it's going to continue, but at the moment it's you have to go to Oregon. You can get approved before going to Oregon,
That's my,
but
so
you
you can
have
get
to die
approved
in
before,
Oregon.
right?
Right. So
Which
all they're
is
sending back
insane.
are the ashes, if they send them back. Yeah, so
If
this is a reality that's going on here, that you're getting this massive expansion, but it's become the financial sort of baby of a certain group of people, and it's hard to believe why killing people has become so popular. What is part of the problem is that I think that people aren't willing to talk about what it actually is. So we've created all these you know talking points, language. So we call it, for instance, in Canada, MAID, and I'm always pointing out, as much as the Dutch, who legalized euthanasia first, they legalized it in 2001, and then the law came into place in 2002. As much as they, sort of paved the way, which is very sad, they call it euthanasia. They call it what it is. When I'm reading articles out of the Netherlands, quite often they refer to it as killing. They use these words. For some reason, their culture is willing to say what it is, and they don't shriek over that. Whereas in Canada, if I call it what it is, they'll shriek over it. So much so that the euthanasia lobbies redefined the word euthanasia. So the word euthanasia is about killing someone out of compassion. So if I kill you out of compassion, that's the term euthanasia. That's the modern understanding of that term, even though the historical meaning was different than that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been that way for the last 50 years. But now they're saying euthanasia means killing somebody without request. Well, that's what
Oh,
happened in Germany. That's correct. During the Second World War, that's
it's
exactly what
without
happened.
request.
Correct. But euthanasia was never defined as being just without request. There was euthanasia by request and euthanasia without request. So what I like about the Dutch only in one way is that they have no fear about being honest about it. Whereas in Canada, we not only create our own terminology, and this is also what's affecting the U.S. and the U.K. debate, etc. We don't want to even hear the proper terminology, so much so that we're going to redefine that also, and then say you're crazy for using this terminology when in fact the terminology is accurate. It's the most accurate terminology there is. So
Well, we had a
and
group
this
call. Well, we had that group call, and I want to address it. We did have a group call where we were having this conversation around the conversation of euthanasia and speaking on other platforms and speaking on other media outlets and things like that. And so I want to talk about it for a second because it does give a perfect example. Even individuals who are in the conversation of prevention and eradicating this pro-death movement instead of healthcare and living, even the individuals who have the same mindsets that we have, the way I choose to speak about euthanasia and state-sponsored killing and murder is very much exactly what it is. I'm speaking about it, what is considered to most Canadians, which I've caught on to, that the way I speak about euthanasia is not welcomed because of the tone and because of the words I choose to use. The problem with that right there is, sure, my delivery could be softer. It could be less aggressive. It could land differently. I don't disagree. I get passionate about some stuff. I'm not going to apologize for it, though. But what I have a hard time with is when we sanitize the way the
Yep.
eugenics programs did, when we do not say what the truth is, which the words are, no different than, say, I don't know, for example, the pandemic, which was designed to psychologically manipulate a population. Hard truth. That's the reality. We don't say things for what they are. And then years down the road, when it feels safe to say so, we then say, oh my God, this was a human experiment. Or, oh my God, this was murder. So for me, when I say the things like they say, well, I'm an extremist when it comes to this topic, I'm really not. I'm a human who has taken humans off the face of the earth and understands the concept of
Yep.
killing.
Yeah, as I say to people all the time, I'm opposed to killing people. People will make comments like I'm some horrific person because I don't have compassion, which of course I consider myself a very compassionate person, but that's got nothing to do with that. They'll say that to me, and
No.
I'm like, no, I'm opposed to killing people.
Right.
Deal with it. Deal with it. I want to go into also what's going on with this Ontario report that came out
Please,
because
let's do
it
so.
was really important. And then everything like a news cycle. Once the news cycle passed,
Mm-hmm.
people would say, "Oh, okay, well that's from the past." So what happened is that the Ontario government. So how it works in Ontario is when a doctor does a euthanasia, so they kill someone, they have to send in the report to the Ontario's chief coroner's office,
And it's
and
a
so
self-reporting system for
it's a
people who don't
self-reporting
understand.
system.
Yes.
So even under this self-reporting system, the chief coroner went through the deaths between so the ones that were pre 2018. So he started this committee looking at all the deaths around 2018, later 2018. So between 2018 and 2023, he
Mm-hmm.
looked at, and with a committee looking at all these deaths, they determined that 428 of the euthanasia killings in Ontario were outside of the law. Now, some of them were cases where the paperwork was not filled out properly, etc., or there wasn't sufficient information, etc., whatever. There wasn't a second signature, so only one doctor had decided not to. But there was quite a few of them that were clearly horrific deaths that
Right.
the government was pointing out. So the government committee actually in this report came out with 6 cases. Now, the committee was very clear, even though some of the members of the committee kept on emphasizing, there's been 22,000 euthanasia deaths in Ontario. Why are we so concerned about the 6? And yet, if they're doing that on purpose to
Of course
diminish
they
the
are.
issue.
Of
But the fact
course.
of it was, is these 6 were representative cases of
Right.
many cases. So instead of
Right.
putting all the cases in the report, the coroner picked 6 cases to focus on. So here's the one with the multiple chemical sensitivities. And what's important about this is in the UK, when they were looking at the assisted suicide issue, we had one of our key euthanasia doctors go to the UK saying, oh, that story about the 51-year-old woman in Toronto who died by euthanasia based on multiple chemical sensitivities, it's not as they reported. Well, it actually was as they reported. It was exactly, because here it shows up in the report. She had a
Right.
history of psychiatric hospital care for depression, anxiety, suicidality. She had post-traumatic stress disorder, and she had related childhood trauma. She had multiple chemical sensitivities. She was living in social housing. And in that situation, she wanted to die because she said, I can't even leave my bedroom. Now, I understand this, but what she needed was a proper place to live. She was not given the right place to live. So even the Ontario Coroner's Office pointed out that case clearly it contravened the basics of the law because she did not have an irremediable medical condition, right? She did
Mm-hmm.
not fit. You had another case of Mrs. B. Miss B here had, okay, it's the same woman. She had difficulty getting housing and everything else. You have this other case here. Mr. C was in his 40s. He was living with quadriplegia. He had a car accident, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Also, the COVID, this was the one around the COVID time, so the COVID-19 pandemic may have contributed to his vulnerability. Mr. C received rehabilitation, but due to his complex medical conditions, he wanted to go home, but they said it wasn't feasible. So he was in a hospital. He was not happy. He was approved for a track 2 euthanasia death. Now, what made this concerning was he died not like his death came very quick after his accident.
Mm-hmm.
And so the disability community was very upset about this because they're saying, well, wait a second. Here's a guy who was never given an opportunity to actually get better from his
Right.
condition. On top of it, his condition he did not have a reasonably foreseeable death. He had certainly quadriplegia, but he did not have a reasonably foreseeable death. There was a case of Mr. C who was separated from his family while receiving ongoing complex continuing care. He was a part of a racialized community. He was then very much feeling alone and lonely, and he died by euthanasia. You had the case of, this was the one that really killed me. You have a guy who was going through, he had a long history of psychiatric needs. He had gone through a lot of suicidal ideation. He was under the care of someone during this psychiatric care. The psychiatrist was the one who actually then brought up euthanasia with him.
How is that not counseling suicide?
It is counseling suicide, we agree. So much so that the coroner put that case as one of the cases. Because obviously speaking, you have someone who's receiving psychiatric care for his suicidal ideation, and it's the psychiatrist who brought it up. So you
That's
get these sort of cases.
disgusting. That doctor needs to have their license revoked and they need to be held accountable. That is like taking an individual. I can't even come up with another comparison that is so atrocious other than saying to, I don't know, somebody going through cancer treatment and going, if you just hit that button right there, this will all stop.
Yep.
Do you know how
That's similar.
sadistic that is?
Well, there was one other case that's even worse than that one. That was the guy who had received multiple COVID shots and then he had reaction to it. And
Right.
so here's a case of a guy who was going through a lot of symptom issues, pain issues. They had done all these tests on him and they found nothing wrong with him. He was asking for euthanasia. He died by euthanasia, but when they did an autopsy on him, they found there was actually nothing wrong with him. There's nothing in his autopsy that showed that there was anything physically wrong with him. So no one's questioning that he wasn't suffering. The question is how can you kill someone without having any proof that he actually had a medical condition? Because as I said in the report, he had multiple testing and they found nothing. They found nothing. Now, that actually gets back to the case of MVWV in Calgary, because
she's also not well. She's also psychologically not well, but there's nothing wrong with her.
That's correct. She is autistic.
Yeah.
She is psychologically
Yes.
not well. She's had a battery of tests on her showing that there's nothing wrong with her, which is exactly what the dad has said to the court.
And
There's
let's
nothing
be
wrong with
clear,
her.
I didn't mean that there was something psychologically wrong with her because she was autistic. What I was saying is there is
That's right.
something wrong with her because she planned a suicide pact with another individual whose mother was a maid provider.
Yeah, so when you start putting all these things together, you
Correct.
realize how sick some of these cases are. And you can't control these things because what happens is these decisions are made behind a closed door. Somebody then kills you. They send in a report. Now remember, the Ontario Commission found 428 cases, but remember, this is self-reported. So therefore,
Right.
there might have been who knows how many, but the other ones were cleaned up a bit better. The
Well,
other
and
thing
that
which was the other thing which is shocking is 1/4 of all the euthanasia providers in Ontario had done at least one death, which the coroner found was outside of the law. One, at least one. 1/4
so
of them.
so this goes back to that kind of thing that was starting to happen during the C word, which is that you could write down the cause of death and it didn't have to actually match. If you used their C word, you got more funding. That's the only thing they did. So you're telling me that the self-reporting system, which we now have known for quite some time, does not work, yet we're continuing to allow doctors who are, again, I really struggle with the word doctor because a doctor saves you and heals you. You're talking about murderers. You're talking about individuals that's like saying to a serial killer, which we have in our system, our healthcare serial killers. Thankfully, Dr. Christopher Lyon with York University has done such an incredible paper on healthcare serial killers, not calling anybody any of that, but just kind of putting it out there and saying, this is the criteria. Do we know anybody that meets it? The fact of the matter is there are healthcare serial killers, and the hallmark of all of them is the ability to only have to self-report. We understand that there is individual biases based on religion, thought process, how you're raised, and your level of trauma. And then if you come into a healthcare system that says only you have to self-report, that is like telling a serial killer, you only have to report the ones that you feel good about reporting, not the other ones, though, because no one will hold you accountable and no one will prosecute you.
That's exactly it, because it's not possible to prosecute, and that's how the law was designed. Now, it is possible to go after a doctor's medical license to say that they have been continuously doing things which were considered outside of the parameters of medical practice or outside of the parameters of the law. So, for instance, if you have a surgeon who's constantly making serious errors, they can lose their medical license or be removed from doing surgery. And in the same way, we should have the same thing with these other killers, even though I don't believe that any of these killers should be allowed to be killers. But you know what I'm saying? But they're doing nothing. It's like crickets. They don't say anything about it. It goes on and on and on and on. I can't get over it how it is continuing this way. And yet, the funny thing is that people say, well, that's okay because, I'm afraid of a bad death. And my response is, well, I too am afraid of a bad death. I want you to receive proper care. I don't want you to have a bad death. I want you to have the best care possible. But I don't think it's a good idea to kill you. Because once I can
No.
kill you,
But also,
now I've got a lot of power over you.
Well, it's not only a power trip thing, though, Alex. Let's take a second on before we even move into power and autonomy and free will, because I think that's an important conversation. You and nobody, including Dying with Dignity, including Compassionate Care, including all of these other organizations that exist to come to your house, whether it's with a helium balloon or with a bunch of medication that is not, number one, at all approved for the use of death, which is a whole other conversation we're going to be doing down the road.
None of these drugs are approved for the use of death. That's exactly the point. That's exactly it. Go on.
They're not. That's why we're going to talk about the Substance Act in America and all of that on our next episode. And the people who go and use helium balloons to do it because it's not noticeable in your system on an autopsy, and they walk out with a helium balloon, and next thing you know, I don't know, grandma just died in her bed. I don't know. That doesn't not happen in America, right?
Happens all the time.
Right. So I want to talk about forget the free will, forget all of those things. Let's just talk about the fact of the matter is you can be killed with a substance that's not approved. You can be coerced into a situation. The self-reporting system we know doesn't work. We understand that expansion is happening. We do understand all of these things. How in the hell do we still have people that have the audacity to sit up in their high towers and say it's not murder? How? What am I
Well,
missing?
well, the funny thing is we know it's murder just from the basic legal standpoint, because of how Canada legalized euthanasia. We legalized euthanasia by creating an exception in our criminal code to homicide.
Right.
So the law calls it murder. They just said, well, as long as two doctors or two nurse practitioners have signed off, and as long as this is the parameters of it, even though they might not follow the parameters, but once they've signed off, it doesn't matter, because they just have the opinion, they fit the criteria of the law, and no one's going to do more than slap your wrist. They haven't even had their wrist slapped.
Right.
They're not even a wrist slapped. I don't know of any cases where there was a wrist slap. Anyway, and yet these people are being killed constantly, and we say, oh, this is compassionate. There's nothing compassionate about it. We go one step further and say, why did we not actually care for these people? Like, what is becoming of a society that thinks that killing is now caring? How did this be? Like, there's always been human difficulty,
Right.
absolutely. But now to say it's okay to kill you is a totally different thing. And then we shouldn't be surprised that it's getting out of control, because
Right.
there's so much incentive in it going out of control. Prime example, cost of healthcare itself. Prime
Well,
example.
Well, we have the cost of healthcare spiking because we've taken so many people into our populations that our system is not sustainable. And we know that. We do understand that. There's a difference between refugees and there's a difference between immigrants. And when you force a population that does not have the infrastructure to take on the level of just hey,
Right.
let's use the words Kim uses, the burden on the healthcare system. The answer should not be kill the people. It should be bring more doctors in, get more funding, stop sending money places it doesn't need to exist, like the 50 million to the Chinese government. I don't understand, and I have never been able to understand. And I have been asked several times now by both parties to run in government. We have a broken system because we have had people at the top telling our societies and our generations, including Dying with Dignity, that death is something we should accept. I'm not saying death at an old age. We should be discussing death more frequently because it is a part of our lives. But
Right.
we should not be doing it from a place of a children's coloring book, normalizing using drugs to take somebody off the face of the earth before their natural expiration date.
That's exactly it. And then we encourage it, and we make it become normalized, and we think that this is all fine and dandy to do this killing, and in fact it's not. And when the stories start coming out about it, then we say, oh well, there's only been a few. Well, wait a second here. We
No.
don't know about all the cases because they're not published. But then I
Right.
asked the next question. Kelsey, you're in British Columbia. Ontario had a report come out showing
Right.
428 cases outside of the law in a self-reporting system. Some of them are massively egregious that were actually pointed out. British Columbia doesn't even have any reporting done like that. None. Zippo.
Why would we report when we know for a fact that there has got to be at least a percentage of that 400 in our population, since we do have some of the highest death numbers on the island with the aging population that we have in British Columbia? Then you take the financial burden. I don't know if you've seen Pierre Poilievre's recent chart that came out showing that British Columbia, Vancouver itself, outside of the what our population makes versus our housing. So you cannot tell me that people have not chosen euthanasia because they cannot afford to live. They would rather kill themselves because that's what it is than actually talk to a system, because there's no housing, there's no funding, there's no government support for these
Right.
people. So of course our numbers are going to be through the roof. And it's no different than the suicide numbers with veterans, right, Alex? So let's take this for example.
Well, the veterans issue is very important.
Well, and I want to do a whole episode on the veterans issue with you next, and looking at some of the other corner reports, but just skating over the surface of it. There is a report, and we have had this, and I've spoken to several CEOs of nonprofits in America. 22 to 44 people every single day, as this episode is recorded, will take their own lives. That's not Canadian numbers. That's not UK numbers, not Australian or any NATO other members. That is strictly American individuals that will kill themselves. I'm so done with this death by suicide shit. I'm done with it. They will take themselves off the face of the earth. It's because they don't have care, because they don't have community, and because they don't have purpose. Well, what are you telling to the civilian population? You cannot get care, you do not need to exist, and you have no purpose because you're a burden on society. You are doing the same damn thing that you did to veterans as you are now doing to the
Yeah.
civilian population. We are a soft launch system, and we always have been.
Yeah, absolutely. The veterans issue and the disability issue are very similar because a lot of veterans, they serve our country and then they get injured, some of them very
Yes.
seriously injured, so they become disabled, and then they come home and there's not the support in place for them at all. We abandon them. So they give their lives, they put themselves on the line. A lot of them then have also psychological issues because they were involved with killing people and they saw some horrific things, things
Right.
that would make any of us shudder. And they had to be part of that as they were serving our country. And then they're dying by suicide, and we're thinking, oh, maybe we should be offering you euthanasia, which is what, of course, our government was doing, and
Oh,
our government then
they
covered it
just
up.
got caught. That was the only thing. They got caught.
Yeah.
But that's the best part, though, of people being caught. Like we knew this, but now we just have the evidence to back it. We have the Prime Minister's office, Justin Trudeau's office, directing the verbiage used, stating very emphatically through the ATIP report that you should not and cannot put this in writing any longer, especially after the Daily Mail, after we dropped a bunch of articles on July 1st last year, stating that this was happening. They caught wind of it and said, well, wow, it's making it all the way to the UK. Maybe we shouldn't put it on paper any longer.
Yeah, so we're going to hide it. We're going to cover it up. It's going to be a massive cover up. You can't get information that's never been actually written down or emailed to anybody because we're going to direct you not to do that anymore. And of course, this is absolutely crazy if you're talking about actually providing veteran services. But
well, that was the number thing.
Go on. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Just gonna no. It's fine. That was the number thing I was gonna get to, right? So like the number reporting is because it's self-reported. It's no different than the veteran issue. We have had veterans take their own lives that have been made to look like something else in order for healthcare or for insurance companies or for government, right? And we have people, we know veterans who have used the euthanasia program, but we can't get a hold of the families because they don't want to talk about it. So you can't tell me those numbers, the 15,241 or the 13,000 or the 10,000 or even the 44 a day. You can never, ever tell me those are accurate numbers because it will always be the percentage that was willing to actually be polled and reported. No different than the polls that you see now. It's only a subset of people who will actually do those things, which tells me that that's not an accurate number. That's actually scratching the surface. That's the tip of the iceberg. It's what you're willing to see. And we're not willing to look at the massive number of individuals. Because if it was 15,241 that's reported, what does the real number look like?
Yeah, I've always reported that these are the reported deaths because I know that there's underreporting going on. This is quite obvious. And actually, what is interesting is if you look at the Quebec data, you do see that there's underreporting within the Quebec data because Quebec is the only province in Canada that produces double sets of numbers. So actually, they produce a triple set. But the point of it is the numbers never add up. So you have regional reporting and you have doctor reporting going on in Quebec, whereas in the rest of Canada, it's just doctor reporting or nurse practitioner reporting, depending on who did the killing. So the fact of it is that even though Quebec's still a system where it's self-reporting, the numbers never add up. It always shows that there's a discrepancy between the data. And so the question is, well, how many of these deaths were not reported? It's the same thing in the U.S. Just it's exactly the same thing in the U.S. If you look at the Oregon assisted suicide data, if you look at last year's data, there was a little over 100 deaths. That so the Oregon government points out that there's a little over 100 people who died in 2023. They know they died. They know they received the assisted suicide drugs, so they know they were approved and they received them. But they actually don't know how they died because no report was received. They just don't know. They just don't know. They know they received the drugs. They know they died. They don't know how they died. No report was received. And so does that happen in Canada? Well, of course it happens in Canada. We just don't know. And you have to do investigations into that to actually find out. That's the other interesting thing with the Dutch. The Dutch are at least honest. I'm half Dutch, okay? So I'll admit. I've always had a funny thing about the Dutch people because my mom's Dutch and the whole thing.
Right.
And my wife's all Dutch, so that makes my kids even more Dutch than me. But anyway, the fact
oh
of
my
it is,
goodness.
The funny thing about it is, though, the Dutch have done these research studies where they've looked at
Right.
all the deaths. So they look at a huge subset of deaths, and then they'll do these questionnaires to find out exactly how that person died and all the
Mm-hmm.
circumstances around that. And what they found is that there's about a 20% underreporting rate for euthanasia in the Netherlands. So that's what they have found with those
That's a
reports.
high number.
Yeah, about 20%. Now Belgium's actually worse because Belgium's done the same reportings, the same type of investigations, and their
Okay.
reports came to about 40%. So this just shows you that in Belgium's worse than the Netherlands. Netherlands is always somewhere around 20%, 20 to 23%. So anyway, the fact of it is at least they've done investigations which actually
Mm-hmm.
show the reality. We've never done anything like that in Canada. There's nothing like that been done in British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, you name it. It's just not been done, and it would require the government putting some money into a university who's actually willing to do a proper questionnaire system to overlook how a subset of people that are not they're not euthanasia deaths, they're just a subset of deaths, and they examine those deaths, and that would tell you exactly what the euthanasia rate is, et cetera, et cetera, and et cetera. Yeah.
Well, the other thing I was going to get to too, and so there is a study being done by, believe it or not, I mean, the government doesn't love that it's being done. They're really actually quite unhappy about it being done. I've been asked to go testify again in Parliament for the third time, which I thought they would learn the first or the second, but apparently we're going to do the third. And I'm going to testify for at least an hour in front of all of the MPs around veteran suicide. So we're going to specifically look at that topic. So they are being forced to start to look at things that they don't want to see anymore. And the other thing I was going to say earlier, and I just kind of circled back to in my brain, was it is one thing for somebody to tell people that this is we were discussing, let me preface, we were discussing around the issue about difficult death. You don't want to have an extreme death, a painful death, a messy death, all of those things.
All those things, yeah.
But the thing that gets me the most is when organizations have the audacity without the medical proof, science evidence whatsoever, even though we know that those drugs that are used actually cause pulmonary edemic states to kick on to the body while somebody is drowning in their own self because Canada uses a paralytic. And so if somebody calls me one more time and says, Kelsey, they don't, I am going to politely tell you to sit and spin because we can prove they do. It's the own BMJ paperwork that shows that Canada uses a paralytic. Anyway, I digress. My point here is, how dare they? How dare they manipulate a family or an individual and have the audacity to sit across from them because Canada does not require specific medications to be used because no medication is qualified for death. But we tell them it is painless and they will feel nothing. How dare we say that with no proof, no evidence, nothing other than their damn word?
And you're absolutely right, Kelsey. And on top of it, they have to use a paralytic because it would be crazy if they did not, because the drug they actually give you, which shuts down your lungs, is very caustic on the body. And so, if you've been involved with this as long as I have, you've read those stories from years ago. Before, in the Netherlands, before they started using a paralytic, you had all these people complaining about someone going into convulsions.
Right.
So they're saying the sad side effect to euthanasia drugs is a certain percentage of these bodies, these people as they're dying, go into convulsions. And that's terrible. No one wants to see that because that doesn't look like a death with dignity. So then they started adding the paralytic to it.
Right.
So they've been doing that ever since.
I know.
And so when they tell you we don't use a paralytic, well, wait a second here. Are your patients dying by euthanasia going into convulsions? No.
No.
Well,
you
it's because you're
them
using
first.
a paralytic. And the protocol calls on that. That's what they do everywhere.
In the protocol.
It's what they're doing in Oregon. It's what they're doing in Canada. It's what they're doing everywhere. And they do it on purpose because they want it to look like a peaceful death. And then they say to you, oh, but Alex, it was a peaceful death.
No, it wasn't. You lied right to their face.
When you've paralyzed someone and you've put them in coma and then you shut down their lungs, you don't know what's going on inside. You have no idea. They can't express it.
No. That's where you're wrong, though, Alex. We do know what's going on because of the largest autopsy cases ever put together by
Oh, well,
Joel
we know
Zivit.
that what's happening is the lungs are filling up. We know that to be the truth.
Right.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
for when but somebody said, well, we don't know what's happening. No. We do know what's happening
Right.
because of that. And because of Joel Zivit's study that I said on Jordan Peterson, we can prove that over 80% of the lungs were heavy lungs, which are indicative of death by drowning or death by waterboarding. So no, dying with dignity. We do know it's painful. We do know you use a paralytic because the BMJ states it very emphatically on our systems. We do know this. The only time we don't know this is when people like Stephanie Green and Ellen Weeb decide to euthanize individuals because they use their own special cocktail, as stated in the National Post in her own words.
Ellen Weeb uses her own cocktail. That's right. So we
She's
don't actually know what she's doing.
special. So we don't even
Yeah.
know what she's using,
That's
but
right.
it's painless, right? And I'm crazy. And I'm the crazy one. Oh, Alex, you're my favorite. You're my favorite. You know why? Not because you tell me I'm right, which because most of the time I fucking am, but also because you are willing to sit here and say the things nobody else will say, and you have the knowledge base to say it. And that's why they get so mad when you and I talk. That's why they get so mad when Joel and I talk. That's why they get so mad when Alicia and Roger Foley and Amanda Ackman, they get so mad when we talk. Because you cannot poke holes in information that is your own words that we just throw back at you. The only difference is they've sat in their own darkness so damn long they forgot what light looks like. And when we come in and shine it, it scares the shit out of them. Hence the attacks, the personal stuff. And the best part, and I found this out, and this made me so happy. Did you know if you produce a podcast in America and you speak in America, you're protected under the First Amendment? Yeah. I'm gonna get louder, Alex. I'm gonna get so much louder. But
You're
in
going to produce
America.
them. You're in America, but there you go.
But don't worry about it. I got it all on lock. You think I'm stupid? Come on. You think these are the first people to come after me? Listen,
No.
the last time they tried to cancel me, what was it, 3 years ago? Ask them how it worked out for them.
Not very well. As I say,
No.
I think that a lot more work has to be done, and you're doing it already on the whole issue of the veterans because of the fact that
Yeah.
I find it insane.
Mhm.
Christine Gauthier serves our country.
Yep.
All she needs is a wheelchair ramp. And they tell her, well, maybe, madam, you should have euthanasia.
Right.
Well, they said medical aid in dying because they don't want to
Right.
say euthanasia.
No. And the Mark
Maybe we should be
Minky.
killing you, Christine. Maybe that's the better
Right.
way of handling it because we don't want to give
Yeah.
you a wheelchair. Now they're giving her a wheelchair ramp. You saw the latest news about her.
Yeah.
It's costing multiple times what it was supposed to cost.
Right.
I guess everyone's got their hand in the pocket. So
Because
the
it's government
government's-
money.
It's government money. So now it was like Christine's shocked. Well, you know how much this is costing? I
Right.
gave them a quote for this, and it's costing this.
Right.
Well, it's because everyone and their dog has got their hand in their pocket, into the government pocket because it's a government job.
Well,
It's
we
insane.
just, and that's the other thing too, right? Is if it's the government, you can make money off of it. It's the reason why we found out so much of the actual COVID relief funds have now gone, it was like 15 billion have now gone to people who did not qualify and they'll never get that money back. But that's just our taxpayer dollars. My other point I was going to state was the very first individual that we got the audio recording from, I cannot say his name, but my point is it's not just Christine Gauthier. It's not just Mark Minky. It's not just my buddy. It's not just this guy or this girl.
No.
There are so many people who have come forward to our groups and said, this happened to me, but I cannot report it because Manulife Insurance or other individuals like Veterans Affairs will cut off my benefits and I cannot live without that money. And I don't disagree. I understand why they don't speak up. So it is incumbent on us to speak up without using their names like WV and MV. And we can use these words. And it is important that we keep talking about it. And I know you and I'll do this a million
But
times
that's why
more.
the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, we're starting a new campaign demanding that the federal government and provincial governments do a total review of the law.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean any deaths will be prevented by it. All it means is that we think that people should know the truth.
Yeah.
Let people decide once they actually hear the truth. Now the problem is, do we have any government in Canada that's willing to do a total review of the law and do it honestly?
Not currently.
I mean, really,
no.
look at these deaths, as I say. I think it's important. Now, if the Liberals won't do it, then we have to pressure the Conservatives to do it, because I'm assuming, of course it hasn't happened yet, I'm assuming they're the next government. And if they're the next government, then they should be doing it. People have the right to know what's happening in our country. and everything is cover up, cover up, cover up, cover up, and then we say,
Yeah.
"Oh, but Alex, we had to do that."
No, we
No, no,
didn't.
you didn't have to do that.
No, you're weak. You didn't
Well, I
have
wouldn't.
to.
People go through difficult times, so I'm not going to call them weak. You know what I mean?
I'm
People go through
talking,
very
no, I'm
difficult
talking
times.
about our government. I'm
Our
talking about
government's
our,
weak. Our
no,
government's weak.
but
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about when the government steps forward, like Christina
Yeah.
Freeland, who has somehow the right to talk about finances when she's the most corrupt person in our government outside of Trudeau. When she sits there and goes, no, we had to do that. No, 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 no. You sick, sadistic human being. You chose to do that. And you stood up there with a stupid ass smile on your face while you know individuals suffered.
Absolutely.
So no, they are weak. And anybody else who just says, you can't say that. No, 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 no. I'm sorry, I can. That's called communism. I'm not participating. This is supposed to be a free nation. And until somebody and the Chinese flag starts flying over that goddamn parliament, I'm going to say the things that nobody wants to say. And I'm going to say them and I'm going to make you uncomfortable. Because, Alex, do you know what happens when you get uncomfortable as a human?
Well, you sweat.
You sweat. But also, that's where the growth lies.
Yes. Yeah, fair enough.
So we have to make you uncomfortable or nobody will ever move. So
thank you, Kelsey.
Thank you so much, my friend. How can everybody go support the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition?
Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. Well, it's epcc.ca, and actually, you might be watching this after the postal strike's done, even though I don't know if the postal strike will ever be done. But the postal strike is something that's really been killing us because a lot of our supporters are average people who make donations by sending a donation in the mail to us, and they're just moms and pops who care about other people, and that's what they do. Well, obviously speaking, the postal strike has shut that down.
Right.
And that makes it very difficult, not only for our organization, but many. But nonetheless, it's been a horrific thing for us. But Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, I also run the world's largest source of information on euthanasia and assisted suicide. My blog, often it's every day, but sometimes I'm busy and I don't produce an article. But I'm always writing about something on this topic, and I'm always doing speaking engagements all over the world on these topics. So that's given me a lot of understanding about what's happening worldwide.
Yeah, definitely the best source of information I've ever encountered. And this is why I keep you in my back pocket, in my front pocket, and then sometimes just in my other pocket, because you are like if I ask you where it comes from, you give me not only the stats, the research, but you actually sit down and you do the human perspective of it.
I got the comment about the email wrong because I only peeked at that before we came on, and then but anyway.
Hey, but here's the difference. You're willing to admit when you're wrong. Most of these people in this space are not. So we make mistakes. We're humans going through a human experience. As long as we admit it and we're willing to accept new information, isn't that the point?
That's exactly the point. That's exactly
absolutely. It. Thank you so much, Alex. You stick with me. Everyone else, we'll see you on another super positive episode around euthanasia. Bye.